You're listening to Phonic on 106.8 FM. Listening to Phonic Radio.
And now I have Emma Morse in the studio with me.
Hello.
Great to have you here. Thanks for coming in, Emma.
Thanks for having me.
I'll just tell you a little bit of a backstory about why Emma's here. And there's two reasons she's here. One of them, and which she'll talk to you about, is that her grandmother is currently living with dementia. And secondly, she's also a counsellor, a city counsellor and a county counsellor, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. And I was inspired to bring the Virtual Dementia Tour to Exeter in May of this year during Dementia Awareness Week. And I was really keen to have a counsellor attend, and I chose Emma.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for coming in today. So tell me about your grandmother first.
My grandma is 90 years old and lovely and squidgy and round and cuddly.
Oh.
I'm very forgetful these days, and we like to refer to it as forgetful because sometimes big scary medical words can make it sound a lot worse for her, I think, more than it does for us. She's fairly early stage dementia. She still needs, or has recently started needing things written down for a lot on whiteboards, but still very much there in other times, very lucid. But my mother is the primary carer for her, so I get to probably deal with the less troublesome aspects of her dementia.
And so does she live with your mum?
No, we all live in the same road in 3 separate houses. So she lives 2 doors down from my mum and 3 from me.
Oh wow! So is your granddad still alive, or is it?
No, my grandpa's been dead for 20 years now. So I think perhaps we didn't pick it up as quickly as maybe we would have if someone had been living with her. But still got it fairly early, and she's able to take medication at the moment that slows down the process.
Yeah. So when was she diagnosed, Emma?
Oh, it must have been about 2 or 3 years ago now.
Right.
So not too recently, but actually, as I say, the medication, the diagnosis meant. But originally, she was unfortunately diagnosed as just getting a bit older and a little bit forgetful.
See, this is a real difficulty, and I think you saying about a diagnosis and receiving that diagnosis 2 or 3 years ago, I think there's something I want to pick up on there, because there's a lot of people I meet that are frightened to get a diagnosis because of the stigma, and yet there's other people that I've met that have said it was a huge relief to get the diagnosis, because whilst yes, there's a stigma is attached to the diagnosis and the word dementia, it meant that it opened up a lot more support networks, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, Dementia UK ring my mum annually now, just to see how she's doing, see what she's up to, check she's all right. Yeah. And I think that's really helpful for my mum, because quite often the stage has moved on, and they can suggest things that maybe she hadn't thought of. Yeah. Things along the lines, she doesn't claim a carer's allowance and hadn't realised she was entitled to it, and still at the moment chooses not to because it's her mum. Yes. But I think actually some people are perhaps not in a position that my mum is to not claim that allowance. Yes. And I think somebody ringing up and letting you know that you can receive money for that care, so that it can be spent on other care as well. It's very helpful. Yeah, I just want to pick up on that, because you said Dementia UK. There's sometimes a little bit of confusion about the two charities. You've got Dementia UK that deal with the Admiral Nurse, and you've got Dementia, the Alzheimer's Society. So probably the Alzheimer's Society in a minute. So they have dementia support workers that do ring up, and they can be as involved as they can be within their remit, and that's good to know that happens. So they're ringing up, and then obviously if there are issues, so who do they ring? How do they ring your mum? They ring my mum. Yes. The primary carer.
Yeah. See, that's always a difficult one, isn't it? Because it's the issue about how do you carry on contacting the person with dementia or the family member, and there's always that.
I think quite possibly, whilst it's not a very late diagnosis, I think the diagnosis came late enough that mum had already taken over a lot of the care for the forgetful lady that she was looking after. So it was different. You couldn't take the step back. I think with earlier diagnosis, it may have been possible to make contact with my grandma. Yeah,
that makes sense. And also going back to the fact that she had a fairly timely diagnosis has meant that she can have medication that will help with the symptoms. Whilst it's important to clarify that it's not curable at the moment, hopefully in the future, it's not at the moment, it can help with some of the symptoms.
It's slowed the process down. You don't know what it would have been like if she hadn't started taking medication, but it feels to me as though it slowed it down. It hasn't been quite as rapid as it potentially could be. Yeah. Good days and bad days, and it definitely is still getting worse, but it doesn't seem to happen in big sort of steps.
Yes.
It's much more of a gradual process.
Yeah, and it sounds like they're all living in the same street, that there's a great support network there as well.
Yes, definitely.
Which is, I think that is the key, really, having a good support network. But, I mean, it'd be interesting, just maybe I can ask the question, have you noticed, or has your mum noticed that friends have fallen away based on the diagnosis, or...?
I think, being 90, a lot of friends had fallen away
right,
already.
Yes, yeah, that's probably
so
the
quite
wrong
difficult
question.
To tell, yeah.
Yes.
Sort of naturally edged off. Friends that are perhaps my parents' friends or neighbours that are, 20, 30 years younger.
Yes.
Still very much part of her life, but I think perhaps as she got older, she'd already started to not go to as many groups as she used to because she was tired. And I think it's very difficult to do a comparison with somebody who's in their 80s and 90s.
Yes, it is. For somebody that's a lot 60s, younger. Yeah, that's true. And would you say that she's aware of that she's got dementia, or...?
She's aware she's forgetful. And I think she's aware sometimes that she feels a burden, which is an awful situation to try and explain that she really isn't a burden to anybody. Yeah. But whether she's aware exactly the ins and outs of her illness, I'm not sure, to be honest. I think there is an element of, for her, she's happier not knowing.
Yes.
Whilst I also understand some people are very happy to be empowered and have all that information.
Yeah. And
it's a very personal journey.
It is. It's so personal. Everybody's so different, and it's obviously going to be different in the fact that your grandmother is 90. If she was 40, it would be different.
Very
so
different.
And some people even younger, when they are younger and they get a diagnosis, they don't want to go on to that whole have a look at the internet and discover everything and think, well, this is the end or whatever. So, but there are others that do. And then they become very empowered, and I think that's really important.
As the carers, from my point of view, I suppose I'm the third step out, but meeting you and gaining more information so that I can sort of empower inwards, I suppose, so that you don't have to engage with the full fright if it's your mum or it's you. If it's scaring you a little, having someone who can just be that step back, know a bit more, but also say, maybe that's not the way we should approach this situation, has been really helpful. So I have you to thank for a lot of that.
Thank you, that's really good. What we're going to do now, Emma, is we're going to play a song, and then afterwards we'll come back and we'll talk about the Virtual Dementia Tour, which you and I both experienced in May. It was really enlightening, and I'd be really interested for you to share, how it was for you. It was a surreal experience, wasn't it?
Very. Yeah. Very.
So we'll leave you with that, and for now we'll play Alana Miles.
On 106.8 FM for Exeter, this is Phonic FM.
Hi, we've got Emma back in the studio, obviously in the studio with us. Before we talk about the Virtual Dementia Tour, I just wanted to sort of share a brief synopsis of what it actually is. So the Virtual Dementia Tour is the original and groundbreaking, evidence-based and scientifically proven method of building a greater understanding of dementia through the use of patented sensory tools and instruction based on research conducted by P.K. Bevel, a specialist in geriatrics and the founder of Second Wind Dreams. So that probably sounds a bit garbled. I apologise for that. But in essence, I discovered this. I saw the Virtual Dementia Tour on a morning programme. I can't remember what morning programme it was. And then I saw it shortly after a piece in The Guardian. And I thought, that's something that that's touring around the UK, and anyone can book it. So I thought, I'm really keen to fund that and get that booked into Exeter. So Emma and I had pleasure's the wrong word, isn't it? I'll leave that to you to explain. What was it like for you?
I don't think pleasure is...
No, it's definitely the wrong word.
But for something that was so negative in many ways was a hugely positive experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was lonely and terrifying and painful and scary. But it also, when you walked out of there, the knowledge, whilst it sort of weighed you down, that living dementia was like that, it also made you suddenly very aware of what could be done differently just to make life just that little bit better for people.
Yeah. So let's try and set the scene. Can you rewind a couple of months and set the scene, how it was like in the room? I mean, it's difficult because we don't want to kind of give it all away, but we also want to highlight how for really everybody to experience this, public services, firefighters, the police, would be such a beneficial experience to offer that greater empathy.
Yeah. I think the best way I think, to describe it is that the second you walk into the door, because you volunteered to be there particularly as well, you suddenly hand your life over to people, and not that you're ever put in danger, but you stop questioning, you stop challenging, you stop making jokes very quickly. I noticed as well, we all lost our sense of humour and just accepted everything that happened to us, everything we were told, and that the lovely lady that actually helped us with it was not very lovely, and that was quite scary as well. And yeah, the acceptance, the idea that, and I can remember somebody saying it's a bit like if you go into a home, into a care home, the second you arrive, you just allow other people to run your life for you. And we all did that. And, you know, in that room, whether there were counsellors or journalists or you were there, very challenging person who will take anybody on for any reason just to get your view across. Suddenly, managers of retirement homes, people who work in service industries, instantly we just submitted and were very quiet.
Yeah. So, and it was like that, wasn't it? So we were sat in the room with the whole group of 12, and then groups of 4 went into another room, a darkened room, for a period of 8 minutes to experience a variety of, we were asked to do a variety of actions, weren't we? Mm-hmm. So what was it like for you in that room? Because we had all these gadgets on, didn't we?
Yeah.
And then we were taken by a hand into this darkened room.
To begin with, I didn't go in the first group, which you did, which also was slightly worrying because you watched a group of people just wander off. And then after a little while, you heard some people screaming, which also adds to how terrified you become. And I'd like to point out, not everybody screamed. It wasn't, that experience didn't involve having to be terrified, but obviously different people react in different ways. And I think you might have been one of the rather loud screams. I was
the loud one, yeah. Oh dear, what does that say about me?
So that brings up, again, another range of emotions in you. And then you have all these gadgets put on and you realise that you're quite uncomfortable in many ways and you can't hear and see as well as you normally would. And then you were given a list of instructions, which I have to admit I couldn't hear any of them. Then led into a room where even more sensory conflicts are in the room. The room was dark, there were lights, it was all a bit much. And then you were expected to continue with the actions that I hadn't even heard the list of instructions, and basically kept being challenged on the fact I was doing nothing when I don't know what I was meant to be doing. And in the end, trying to find some kind of peace that let you carry on through it. And I've just been explaining in the little break that I can remember thinking at one point, I can stop this, I don't like it, I'm going to stop it, and then realising that I could stop it, and that anyone who was living with, and I think you said it was level 6, levels,
about 4 or 5, something like that,
dementia, there is no end, there is no sudden moment of peace, and that the least I could do was sort of sit through 8 minutes of what was going on. But it was definitely very lonely and very scary, and I found myself very much internalising and not really engaging with the activity.
And that was really interesting, that saying that how you didn't engage but you kind of let go as well. And it makes me think that some people, when they go into care facilities, and I'm not generalising, but some people, I see them when I go into them sometimes, and I can see a sort of a sense of, we can't necessarily get exactly what we want, so we'll just let go and just let things happen. And I know that some of that will come with age or whatever, but it was different that, how our experience was, and giving the instructions and not being able to hear properly, with the ear defenders on. It was surreal, wasn't it?
But it was another example of, I'm not sure other people might not have, but I didn't at any point go, pardon? Could you say that again? I didn't hear, you just accepted that it ended. There was no more to be done, and you just had to get on with it, which was also, I think, that was one of the most unusual reflections that all of us found, were that none of us had tried to make our life any easier, actually. We'd just gone, all right, if I must.
Yeah, I went with it and felt and different. And, there were, throughout the day, there were 36 people that experienced the Virtual Dementia Tour, and everyone had very different experiences. And there's another... the former city centre manager has written in this month's Exeter Life, actually, July's Exeter Month, about his experience. But it's just interesting how different people were. And I remember I had the privilege to, I went into, experienced it, and then I sort of, for the other sessions, I sat back quietly in the corner and I watched people being directed, and the aura I was getting, it was a lot of fear around there about or even what do I do. I think I remember looking at you and you kind of, it did come across like you sort of kind of just allowed it to happen. But tell me about I mean, we don't want to give too much away, because actually, whilst this to anyone listening may sound really scary, it's so worthwhile. We need to highlight that, don't we?
I wouldn't... I'd advise anyone to do it, and I'm glad that I did it, despite the sort of brief 10 minutes of panic and worry and the loneliness are worth it, actually, for what you learn within it, I think. And whilst it's making it sound terrifying and terrible, which I think we have to accept that dementia can be, and that we need to know that. It sort of made me an evangelist for wherever I go. I tell everybody about it and how much easier and simpler just introducing yourself to somebody when you meet them, standing in front of them where their vision is better, not mumbling to the side or having too much going on, and just dealing with my grandma. The clearer you can make everything, and she's by no stage at this point along the line, but just there are so many ways to be nicer. And actually, it's not just for people with dementia. If you meet somebody and you look them in the eye and tell them who you are, it's a really friendly thing to do.
Absolutely.
So actually the world could be a lot better, just generally, if we just changed our attitudes and were a bit better.
And that's interesting, because I see that as well. I think, it is about being compassionate human beings and respectful, and treating everyone with that, that general respect and humility, really.
Yes.
So just let's talk about because we did say in the break, and we talked about, your grandmother and the one direction you had within your experience. Describe that.
There was, we were told to do certain things, and like I said, I didn't hear what they were. But wanting to make myself useful, there was a very mundane domestic chore that I decided that I could do. And what's quite interesting is it's very similar to the thing that if you sit my grandma down, you give her a pile of washing. She loves matching up socks or just folding T-shirts. And I think it's because quite a lot of the time now she doesn't necessarily feel useful. So actually, little mundane domestic chores, she does them quite happily to feel useful, and strangely my way of feeling useful was to do exactly the same thing she does, so it made me smile. I think that's why I smiled through quite a lot of it, because I just thought, I'm doing exactly what she does.
And I was the onlooker, so I saw the smiling and I saw the folding, and it was really interesting then, as we discussed it afterwards, for you to share your reflections on how it felt and how you followed that through. It's sort of mirroring what she does. How interesting. So it must have been kind of in your head as well as feeling different emotions.
It made it easier for me to identify that if there is a simple task that makes someone feel useful and part of the family they're living in or the society, that it's strange the peace that can come from that, and that in a very scary situation there was a level of peace. So I'm always quite happy now to find my grandma's socks to fold.
Absolutely. but that's such an important point, and the reason I say that is because a lot of people that I talk to will say, my mother, my father, my friend can't do what they used to anymore, and that's really upsetting. But it's about focusing on what they can do. So whilst they might not be able to do the washing and do all those things, what they could do is to feel valued, is to be able to do that folding.
Honestly, in my house, there's always washing to be done. You're always valued if you want to do some folding in my house.
Well, there you go then. Mine too, actually. But, I hear people say, that they used to bake and they can't anymore. But if they've got the support, while sequencing might be difficult, and the stages of baking or the stages of washing, to be able to give them some part in that is going to make them feel valued. And I think that's really important, empowering people.
Definitely.
That are living with dementia. It's been great to have you on, Emma.
Thank
you so much. And you're going to share a song, aren't you?
Yes.
Which is lovely.
We're going to share one of my grandma's favourite songs, which is Jim Reeves' I Love You Because, which is not a song I'd necessarily have picked, but my grandpa used to sing it to her, but he used to change the lyrics to slightly more, I think you could say, rude, but not necessarily in a sexual sense. Things like, you're short and you're dumpy is why I love you.
Oh, thank you so much, Emma. That's brilliant.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.